If you're listening right now, I need you to do me one favor. Before we start, hit that like button, drop a comment about what you do in Marcus's place, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters. Trust me, you're going to want to know how this ends. Now, let's begin. The first thing Marcus Hale noticed was the sound, low, throbbing, alien in a way no human city could imitate. A pulse that wasn't music, wasn't machinery, but alive. When his vision cleared, he realized why. Thousands of throats were chanting. Not in unison. Not like a crowd back home. This was more primal, waves of guttural syllables crashing against each other, a wall of noise that pressed into his bones. He was standing on polished black stone, wrists locked in metal cuffs that shimmered with faint blue energy. The air smelled of burnt ozone and something sweeter, coppery, almost like blood. And above him, tier upon tier of alien faces leaned forward from the arena stands, scaled, furred, plated, and something in between, every pair of eyes locked on him. A voice boomed from the far end, amplified so it cracked the air. Prisoner. You stand in the court of war. Your crimes against the Vornath Dominion are punishable by death, unless you prove yourself. From behind an ornate railing, a figure stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, encased in segmented armor the color of old bronze. His face was ridged with sharp lines, like someone had carved it out of stone. Eyes like molten silver studied Marcus, not with hate, but with the cool detachment of a predator deciding if a smaller animal was worth eating. Kareth Vorn. Marcus recognized the name from the scraps of overheard alien speech during his capture. Warlord's champion. Veteran of 100 battles. The kind of man, or whatever he was, that other warriors feared to face. You are human, Kareth said, making the word sound like a diagnosis. Soft-skinned. Weak-boned. Yet you trespassed where no prey should tread. He gestured and the crowd roared. You will fight. Not a soldier. Not a machine. You will face the apex beast of Vornath. If you live, you walk free. Marcus rolled his shoulders. His hands were bound, but they wouldn't be for long. The voice in the back of his skull, the one that had kept him alive through insurgent ambushes and orbital bombardments, reminded him to keep his breathing slow. Any chance we can just play cards instead? A ripple of confusion passed through the alien audience. Kareth tilted his head as if filing away this strange human behavior for later. You will not jest when you see it. The arena floor trembled. A seam split open beneath Marcus's boots, and from the shadows rose a shape so massive it made his throat tighten in spite of himself. 10 feet tall at the shoulder, its hide was a patchwork of chitin plates and scarred flesh. 4 eyes glowed like burning coals. Its mouth unfolded in layers, revealing curved teeth designed to slice through bone. Thick ropes of saliva hissed when they hit the stone. The crowd's chant shifted, growing faster. Marcus couldn't make out the words, but he didn't have to. They were the kind of sound a mob makes when it smells blood coming. The beast's head swiveled toward him. Each of its breaths came out as a low growl. Its front claws dug gouges into the arena floor. Kareth raised one arm. Release. The energy cuffs fell away from Marcus's wrists with a crackle of static. The apex beast lunged. Time slowed the way it always did when Marcus's adrenaline hit. He sidestepped, letting the creature's momentum carry it past him, claws screeching against stone. It pivoted faster than he'd guessed, but Marcus had already moved, reading the shift in its weight the way he'd once read a hostile's shoulders before a knife strike. The crowd's excitement faltered, just slightly. They'd expected the human to be torn apart in the first charge. Instead, Marcus was circling the beast, eyes narrowed, not in fear but in calculation. It roared, lunged again. This time he didn't back away. He dropped into a low crouch, hands slipping into the side pocket of his tattered combat pants. His fingers closed around something small, crinkly. The apex beast was 3 meters away when he flicked his wrist and tossed it, a compact rectangle wrapped in olive drab foil, straight into the creature's path. It hit the ground with a muted clack. The beast skidded to a halt, nostrils flaring. It lowered its head, sniffed, and, ignoring Marcus entirely, hooked the packet with one claw and tore it open. The scent of processed meat protein filled the air. In the stands, the crowd murmured in confusion. The beast sniffed again, then took the entire ration block in one gulp. Its chewing slowed. Its growl faded. And then, impossibly, it sat down. Marcus straightened, brushing dust from his knees. See? Just needed lunch. Kareth stared. Not in disbelief. No, the champion's expression was something rarer. Interest. As if a question he didn't know he had was suddenly demanding an answer. The warlord's advisors leaned in toward their master's box, their voices urgent. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but the tone was unmistakable. This wasn't the show they'd promised the people. The apex beast shifted closer to him, its bulk casting a shadow that covered him completely. It lowered its head and made a deep, rumbling noise, less a growl than a sound he'd heard from old shepherd dogs resting by the fire. Marcus reached up and tapped the side of its jaw with 2 fingers. "Good boy." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some of the alien faces leaned back as if they'd just watched someone put their head in a guillotine and live. Others leaned forward, eyes wide, captivated. Kareth descended the steps from his platform, his armor whispering with each movement. He stopped 2 paces from Marcus and the beast, his gaze flicking between them. "You fed it. Worked, didn't it?" Kareth's eyes narrowed. "No one feeds the apex beast. It does not submit." Marcus smiled faintly. "Maybe no one's tried the right snack." For a long moment, Kareth just stood there, the noise of the arena fading under the weight of his attention. Then he turned to the warlord's dais. "Spare the human. I claim him for study." The warlord shifted on his throne, his many-jointed fingers drumming against the armrest. His voice, when it came, was low but carried across the arena. "You have 1 cycle. If he proves useful, he lives. If not, feed him to what he thinks is his pet." The crowd erupted in a dozen conflicting sounds, cheers, jeers, something like laughter. Guards in segmented armor closed in around Marcus, their weapons humming. The beast growled, a sound that made every one of them hesitate. Kareth glanced at Marcus as the guards formed a loose perimeter. "Walk," he said. Marcus gave the beast one last pat on the jaw. "Don't eat anyone unless they try to shoot me." The creature blinked its 4 eyes slowly, almost like it understood. Then it followed, padding behind him like an oversized shadow. As they left the arena, Marcus could feel every alien gaze on his back, burning with a mix of fear and fascination. He'd arrived here as prey. Now they weren't so sure. But he could still feel the weight of Kareth's stare, and in it, he recognized something dangerous. Not hatred, not contempt. Something more unpredictable. Curiosity. And that, Marcus thought, was the kind of thing that got people killed in war. The corridors beneath the arena were colder than Marcus expected. Stone walls sweated condensation, and the air carried the scent of oil, metal, and something faintly acrid. The guards moved in silence, but their eyes kept darting to the apex beast lumbering behind him. It had no leash, no collar, just a quiet awareness that wherever Marcus went it would follow. Kareth led the way, his stride steady, shoulders broad enough to block most of Marcus's view. The champion's armor whispered with every step, plates shifting in precise harmony. When they reached a reinforced door, Kareth stopped and motioned for the guards to stand back. He pressed his palm against a panel, the metal groaned and the door slid open. The chamber beyond was Spartan, a broad space with stone flooring and a single table in the center. Racks of weapons lined one wall, blades with serrated edges, rifles with curved barrels, and a few implements Marcus couldn't classify. Kareth turned, silver eyes locking on him. "You do not fear it," he said. It wasn't a question. Marcus shrugged. "Fear's not useful when it's already in the room." The beast padded past him, circling the table before settling on the floor with a heavy thump. Its 4 eyes stayed fixed on Marcus. Kareth studied the 2 of them for a long moment. "You know its name?" "I'm guessing it's something dramatic in your language. I call him Big Fella." A faint twitch crossed Kareth's mouth, gone so quickly Marcus wondered if he imagined it. "It has killed champions. Hunters. Whole squads. You feed it and it obeys." Marcus leaned against the table. "It doesn't obey me. It trusts me. There's a difference." Kareth paced slowly, his boots scraping faintly on the stone. "Trust. A concept we use with warriors, not with weapons." "That's your first mistake," Marcus said. "You think those are different." The champion stopped pacing. His gaze sharpened, like the edge of a blade catching light. "You presume much for prey." Marcus held his eyes. "I stopped being prey the moment your beast didn't eat me." For a heartbeat, the air in the chamber seemed heavier. Then Kareth motioned to the guards, who stepped back even farther, giving them space. "The warlord wishes you alive for 1 cycle. That will change unless you give him reason to keep you." "Teach me." Marcus's brow furrowed. "Teach you what?" "How you tamed it." "Already told you." "I didn't." Kareth's voice dropped a fraction. "Do not waste my time. Show me." Marcus glanced at the beast, which had begun to doze, its breathing slow and steady. He knelt, fished another ration pack from his pocket and unwrapped it. The scent drifted through the chamber. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably. The beast's eyes opened, fixing on Marcus. "Come here, big fella," Marcus said, his voice even. The creature rose and approached, claws clicking softly on the floor. It stopped just short of him, waiting. Marcus offered the ration block on an open palm. The beast leaned down, teeth inches from his hand, and took the food gently. Karetha's gaze didn't waver. "It should tear your arm away with it." "Then maybe stop telling it that's how it's supposed to behave," Marcus replied. Kareth stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them. "You believe we have shaped it wrongly. I believe you've spent so long trying to make it a perfect weapon that you forgot something important. Every weapon can turn on its owner." The champion was silent for a moment. Then he turned to the beast, speaking in a low, guttural language Marcus didn't understand. The creature flicked an ear but didn't move. "It ignores my commands," Kareth said. "You give none, yet it moves for you. That's because I'm not ordering it around. I'm asking. You don't bark orders at someone you trust to have your back. You treat them like a partner." Kareth regarded him as though the words themselves were alien. "A partner?" he repeated. The door hissed open and a thin-robed alien with mottled skin entered. It bowed to Kareth before speaking in quick, clipped tones. Marcus caught only fragments through the translator pinned to his collar, words like demonstration, invasion, and deployment schedule. Karetha's jaw tightened. He dismissed the messenger, then looked back at Marcus. "The warlord plans to unleash the beast against the Korthor settlements in 2 cycles. It will tear through them. The survivors will be trophies." Marcus straightened. "And you're just going to let that happen?" "It is not my decision to make. It could be." Karetha's eyes narrowed again. Dangerous words. Truth usually is. The champion turned away, crossing to the weapons rack. He selected a long, curved blade, testing its weight before setting it on the table between them. "If you believe your way is better, prove it. Train it for war your way. If it is stronger, perhaps the warlord will listen." Marcus considered. "And if it's not?" Kareth didn't answer. "You didn't have to." They began that same day. The guards brought supplies Marcus requested. Simple things. Food, water, heavy cloth, scrap metal. Kareth observed in silence as Marcus used them to teach the beast commands. Hand gestures, whistles, even simple verbal cues. At first, the creature responded only to Marcus. When Kareth attempted the same motions, it hesitated, then ignored him entirely. Frustration flickered across the champion's features, though he masked it quickly. "You're too forceful," Marcus told him. "It can feel that. It is an animal. It's more than that. You just refuse to see it." Days passed in a rhythm of training and observation. The beast learned to distinguish between hostile and non-hostile targets, to move on silent signals, to shield instead of strike. Slowly it began to tolerate Karetha's commands, not because of fear but because Marcus was always nearby, bridging the gap. One evening after a long session, Kareth handed Marcus a flask of something bitter and burning. "For warriors," he said simply. Marcus took a cautious sip. "Thought I wasn't one of those." Kareth met his gaze without flinching. "I have fought beside many. Few have earned that name. Fewer still without lifting a weapon." The beast, resting nearby, made a low, contented rumble. Marcus chuckled. "Guess big fella agrees with you." Before Kareth could reply, the chamber doors burst open. A guard stumbled in, bleeding from a deep slash across his chest. His armor was scorched in places. He gasped out words between ragged breaths. The translator crackled, "Sabotage, lower levels, something, coming." Another guard appeared behind him, dragging him away as alarms began to wail, a shrill, rising tone that set Marcus's teeth on edge. Kareth was already moving toward the door. Marcus stood, the beast rising with him. "What's happening?" Karetha's reply was grim. "Someone has freed the war beasts from their cages." The lights flickered, plunging the chamber into half-darkness. In the distance, deep within the fortress, something roared, louder than big fella and far less friendly. Kareth looked at Marcus, silver eyes catching the dim light. "Stay here if you value your life." Marcus glanced at the beast, then back at Kareth. Not a chance. They stepped into the corridor together, the air thick with the scent of blood and smoke, the beast padding silently behind. Somewhere below, claws scraped stone and the sound was getting closer. The corridor sloped downward, the walls trembling with each distant impact. The air was heavy with smoke and the faint tang of scorched stone. Somewhere ahead, the roar of an unseen creature rolled through the passage, deep enough to make the torches along the wall flicker. Kareth moved with the precision of a predator, his weapon drawn, a long, serrated blade that caught the torchlight like fire. Marcus stayed close, big fella between them and the shadows ahead. Every few steps, the beast would stop, nostrils flaring, then push forward again. "They'll be heading for the upper levels," Kareth said without looking back. Marcus glanced at the walls, noting the narrow slits high above, vents for air and sound. "And what's up there?" "The warlord's court. The armories. The launch bays. So if these things get there first." Kareth didn't answer, but the tightening of his jaw was enough. The floor shook again, this time from a closer source. A low, grinding sound followed, like metal being dragged over stone. Marcus raised a hand, signaling for Kareth to stop. Big fella froze, muscles coiled. From the shadows ahead, something emerged. A creature as tall as the corridor ceiling, plated in dull black armor that looked grown rather than forged. Its limbs were long, ending in scythe-like claws, and its head was a blunt wedge lined with rows of teeth that pulsed faintly with bioluminescence. It hissed, the sound vibrating in Marcus's chest. "War Reaper," Kareth murmured. "Bred to kill armored infantry." "Guess we're lucky we're not armored," Marcus said. The Reaper lunged before Kareth could reply. Big fella intercepted, slamming into it with a force that rattled the walls. The two beasts crashed together, claws and teeth flashing in the dim light. Kareth surged forward to flank, his blade biting into a gap in the Reaper's plating. Marcus didn't hesitate. He darted in on the opposite side, jamming a length of metal piping he'd grabbed from the floor into the Reaper's joint. The creature screeched, twisting toward him, but Big Fella seized the opening and clamped its jaws around the Reaper's throat. With a wrenching crack, the Reaper collapsed, its limbs twitching before going still. Kareth stepped back, breathing hard but steady. "You move like a warrior." "Old habits," Marcus said, wiping blood, green and faintly steaming, from his hands. Big Fella huffed, shaking its head before padding toward the next bend in the corridor. They moved on, passing more signs of chaos. Splintered doors, scorch marks on the walls, the bodies of guards sprawled where they'd fallen. A faint rhythmic pounding echoed from ahead, accompanied by the sharp crack of weapons fire. When they reached the next chamber, Marcus saw why. 3 more Reapers were tearing through a squad of defenders, their claws slicing through armor like paper. One soldier tried to fall back toward a heavy blast door, but a Reaper caught him mid-step, dragging him into the fray. Kareth didn't slow. "Left," he barked. Marcus and Big Fella veered as Kareth charged straight ahead, his blade flashing in tight arcs. Big Fella hit the nearest Reaper like a battering ram, sending it sprawling. Marcus dove in, grabbing a dropped pulse rifle from the floor. The weapon was heavier than it looked, but he braced it and fired. The shots tore glowing lines across the second Reaper's flank, drawing its attention away from a wounded defender. Kareth vaulted onto the back of the third Reaper, driving his blade down through the base of its skull. It collapsed instantly. By the time the last Reaper fell, the defenders were either dead or too wounded to fight. One of them, barely conscious, looked up at Kareth with something between fear and awe. Kareth gave no reply, only gestured for Marcus to follow. "They weren't just released to cause chaos," Marcus said as they climbed a short flight of stairs at the chamber's far end. Kareth glanced back. "You think there's a purpose?" "I know there is. Someone's making a play." Kareth didn't disagree. The stairs opened onto a narrow bridge spanning a deep chasm within the fortress. Far below, molten rock cast an orange glow over jagged spires. Across the bridge, the sound of battle was louder, shouts, metal striking metal, and the screech of beasts. Halfway across, the bridge shook violently. From beneath it, another Reaper hauled itself up, claws digging into the stone. Its head swung toward Marcus, teeth bared. Before it could lunge, Big Fella roared, a deep, resonant sound that made the Reaper pause. The two stared at each other for a heartbeat. Then Big Fella charged, ramming it back toward the edge. The Reaper's claws scraped stone, leaving deep gouges. Marcus grabbed the nearest support beam, swung around, and kicked at the Reaper's hind limb. It stumbled, and Big Fella took the chance to drive it over the edge. The creature's scream echoed up from the chasm before fading into the molten roar below. They reached the far side of the bridge just as another alarm began to sound, a lower, more urgent tone. Kareth's expression hardened. "That's the launch bay," he said. Marcus kept moving. "Then we'd better hope we're not too late." The corridor beyond sloped upward, the air growing hotter. Ahead, a wide set of blast doors were half open, smoke curling through the gap. Figures moved beyond them, some armed, some in the segmented armor of the warlord's elite guard. Kareth raised a hand, signaling Marcus to stop. Too many to take head-on. Marcus scanned the space, mind racing. His gaze landed on a suspended walkway above the bay doors, partially collapsed but still intact enough to cross. "We can go over." Kareth followed his eyes, then nodded once. Quietly, they climbed to the walkway, the metal groaning under their weight. From here Marcus could see into the launch bay. Several small attack craft were already powered up, their engines glowing. The bay floor was swarming with guards, and, in the center, a massive holding cage. Inside, more war beasts paced, their eyes glinting in the dim light. "They're loading them for deployment," Marcus murmured. Kareth's voice was low. "The invasion begins tonight." A sharp metallic clang from behind them froze them both. From the far end of the walkway, a shadow detached from the wall, a lean figure in matte black armor, moving with silent precision. Marcus didn't need a translator to read the hostility in its posture. The figure lunged, blade flashing. Kareth met it mid-stride, the clash of steel ringing through the bay. Marcus moved to flank, but the assassin was fast, faster than anything they'd fought so far. The walkway shuddered as the fight shifted toward its edge. A lucky strike from the assassin sliced one of the supports, sending a shower of sparks into the air. The metal under Marcus's feet groaned. Big Fella surged forward, its bulk slamming into the assassin from behind. The impact carried all three of them toward the railing. Marcus grabbed a strut, holding himself back as the assassin toppled over the side. It caught the edge with one hand, blade still clutched in the other. Kareth didn't hesitate. He brought his boot down hard, breaking the grip. The assassin fell, vanishing into the chaos below. The walkway tilted dangerously. Marcus and Kareth scrambled for the far end, leaping down to a service platform just as the structure tore free and crashed into the bay floor. Shouts rose from below. The guards had seen them. Weapons fire lanced the air, forcing Marcus and Kareth into cover. Kareth's voice was clipped, urgent. "We cannot fight them all." Marcus's gaze swept the bay, landing on a control panel beside the beast cages. "Maybe we don't have to." Kareth followed his line of sight. Understanding lit his eyes. They moved together, weaving through the catwalks until they dropped to the bay floor behind a stack of fuel cells. Marcus broke into a sprint for the panel while Kareth covered him, deflecting incoming fire with precise, brutal strikes. Bullets sparked off the metal housing as Marcus slammed his hand onto the release controls. The cage doors began to rise with a grinding screech. The first of the beasts emerged, snarling, eyes burning. Chaos erupted as they turned on the nearest guards. Kareth grabbed Marcus's arm. "We must move now." They ducked into the smoke and confusion, Big Fella at their heels. As they slipped through a maintenance hatch at the bay's edge, Marcus glanced back once. The warlord's carefully bred weapons were tearing his own forces apart. Kareth sealed the hatch behind them, the sound of battle muffled to a dull roar. For a moment neither spoke. Then Kareth said, "You may have just changed the course of a war." Marcus allowed himself a tight smile. "Good. Let's make sure we survive to see how it plays out." But even as they started down the maintenance corridor, a cold certainty settled in his gut. Someone had set this in motion long before he arrived, and they weren't finished yet. The maintenance corridor curved upward, the air growing warmer with each step. The distant roar of engines vibrated through the walls, underscored by the sporadic crack of weapons fire. Marcus kept pace with Kareth, Big Fella padding silently behind, its claws clicking faintly on the metal flooring. Kareth's voice was low, measured. "The warlord will not retreat. He will see this sabotage as a challenge. He will answer it with blood." "Then we make sure it's his," Marcus replied. They emerged into a narrow service bay that opened onto the upper arena floor. The vast chamber beyond was transformed, no longer a place for sport but a staging ground for war. Soldiers moved in tight formations, banners rippling above their heads. At the far end, the warlord himself stood on an elevated dais, flanked by armored guards, his many-jointed hands resting on the hilt of a ceremonial blade. His voice carried over the gathered troops, every word deliberate and resonant. Kareth slowed, scanning the positions of the guards. "If we strike here, there will be no escape." Marcus's eyes locked on the warlord. "Then we don't strike him yet. We strike his control." He pointed to the command tower looming above the dais, a spire of black metal bristling with antennae and comms arrays. Whoever controlled it could direct every troop movement, every launch order, every reinforcement. Kareth's gaze followed the line of Marcus's finger. "Cut the head from the snake." "Exactly." They circled the arena's edge, keeping low. Big Fella moved with surprising stealth for its size, slipping into shadows as if it understood the importance of silence. The command tower's base was heavily guarded, but the chaos from the released war beasts was spreading, Several soldiers were already peeling away to reinforce the launch bay. Marcus caught Caretha's eye, signaling the approach. They moved in fast, Caretha cutting through the first guard with a fluid upward slash, Marcus disarming the second with a brutal twist of the wrist before slamming him into the wall. Big Fella barreled into the third, sending him sprawling. Inside, the tower's narrow staircase spiraled upward, the walls alive with the hum of energy conduits. They climbed quickly, pausing only when the muffled sound of boots above told them they were not alone. The first guard at the top barely had time to shout before Caretha's blade silenced him. Marcus shoved the body aside and pushed through the final hatch into the command deck. Banks of consoles lined the walls, manned by operators who froze at the sight of them. Caretha moved with the precision of someone who had fought in confined spaces before, striking with controlled efficiency. Marcus went straight to the main terminal, scanning the alien script until his translator caught up. A tactical display showed the fortress and surrounding territory. Red markers moved in coordinated patterns, responding to commands from the deck. Marcus began overriding the signal pathways, severing the link between the tower and the troops on the ground. The operators tried to intervene, but Big Fella's presence kept them rooted in place, its low growl promising consequences. Caretha's voice cut through the din, "The warlord will know we are here." "He's going to know a lot more than that," Marcus said, fingers flying across the interface. With a final keystroke, the red markers dissolved into scattered blips, disorganized, isolated units now operating without orders. Outside, the sound of disciplined marching gave way to confused shouts. Caretha stepped to the viewport, watching the warlord below turn sharply, scanning the upper tiers for the source of the disruption. "He will come for us." "Let him," Marcus replied. The words had barely left his mouth when the chamber's outer wall exploded inward. Shards of stone and metal ripped through the air as a hulking figure stepped through the breach, armor heavier than any soldier's, ceremonial blade gleaming in one hand. The warlord's eyes locked on Caretha first, then shifted to Marcus and finally to Big Fella. His voice was cold, deliberate. "You corrupt my champion. You turn my weapon against me. You will not leave this place." Caretha stepped forward, his blade raised. "By ancient law, I challenge you for rule of this domain." The warlord's lip curled. "You are unworthy." Marcus met Caretha's gaze. "You can take him?" Caretha's expression was iron. "With you at my side." The warlord moved first, his strike a blur despite the weight of his armor. Caretha met it with a parry that sent a jarring shock up his arm. Marcus darted in low, striking at the warlord's knee with the butt of a stolen rifle. The blow staggered him for a fraction of a second, enough for Caretha to press the attack. They fought in brutal, close quarters, the clash of steel and the scrape of armor filling the room. Big Fella circled, keeping the operators pinned while watching for an opening. The warlord's strength was immense, each blow forcing Caretha back a step, but Marcus disrupted his rhythm with quick, surgical strikes, elbows, knees, the edge of a blade where it could slip between plates. A wide swing from the warlord's blade cut a shallow line across Caretha's side, but he used the momentum to drive his own sword upward, catching the warlord beneath the arm. The alien roared, backhanding Caretha hard enough to send him crashing into a console. Marcus stepped in before the warlord could follow through, raising his blade, only for the warlord to seize it in one massive hand and wrench it away. The ceremonial weapon lifted high over Marcus's head. The blow never landed. Big Fella slammed into the warlord's back with the force of a battering ram, teeth sinking into the joint of his armor. The warlord bellowed, twisting to strike, but Marcus was already moving, seizing the dropped blade and driving it up beneath the alien's jaw. For a moment, everything was still. Then the warlord's knees buckled and he fell, the weight of his armor shaking the deck. Caretha rose slowly, breathing hard, eyes fixed on the fallen body. He turned to Marcus, a faint, almost imperceptible nod passing between them. Outside, the confused shouts of the troops gave way to silence. When Caretha stepped out onto the command deck's balcony, every eye in the arena turned to him. "The warlord is dead," he said, his voice carrying over the chamber. "His reign is ended. I claim this domain, not through conquest but through strength shared." He gestured to Marcus. "This human stands as my brother in arms. He tamed our greatest beast not with chains but with trust. Let that be the law of our future." The crowd shifted, a ripple of uncertainty running through them. Then, slowly voices began to rise, not in anger but in something like acceptance. Marcus stepped to Caretha's side, Big Fella settling between them. "You sure about this?" he murmured. Caretha's gaze remained on the crowd. "I am sure of one thing, we are stronger together than apart." Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Guess the galaxy's in for a surprise. Later, when the arena had emptied and the command tower was theirs, Kareth poured 2 measures of the harsh, bitter drink they'd shared once before. He handed one to Marcus without a word. To new rules, Marcus said. Kareth touched his cup to Marcus's. And to the human who showed me that the sharpest blade is not always the deadliest. Big fella rumbled contentedly at their feet, eyes half closed. Marcus reached down and gave it another treat. Kareth watched the exchange, a faint curve to his mouth. You know they will speak of this day for generations. Yeah, Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. But they'll probably remember the part where I made their apex predator sit for a snack. For the first time since they'd met, Kareth laughed, low, deep, and genuine. It was a sound Marcus thought he could get used to. And somewhere beyond the fortress walls, the galaxy kept turning, unaware that 2 warriors and a beast had just rewritten its rules. The silence after the battle was deafening. Smoke curled lazily through the ruined docking bay, rising from twisted metal and shattered glass. The apex beast stood in the center, its chest rising and falling like a bellows, eyes still lit with a residual feral glow. Every alien soldier who had tried to tame it now lay scattered or fled, their weapons useless on the ground. Rian stepped forward slowly, boots crunching over debris. His knuckles were bloodied, his breath shallow, but there was a glint in his eyes, half exhaustion, half grim satisfaction. Easy, he said softly, his voice steady despite the tremor in his body. It's over. The beast turned its massive head toward him, lips curling just enough to reveal a hint of teeth, not in aggression but in recognition. Somewhere in the battle, the fine line between handler and predator had blurred. A shadow shifted near the hangar's entrance. Commander Varen emerged, limping, his uniform torn and smeared with soot. You think this is over, human? His voice carried the bitter rasp of a man who'd lost everything in a single night. You've only delayed the inevitable. The Syndicate will rebuild. And when we do... Rian didn't let him finish. You'll come back for it? He jerked his chin toward the apex beast. You already had your chance. And you didn't just lose. You proved you never deserved it. The beast's growl rolled like distant thunder. Varen's jaw twitched, but his eyes flicked to the towering creature, and he took a step back. Even in defeat, pride held him for a moment longer. Then survival took over, and he vanished into the smoke without another word. Terran finally limped into view, his arm wrapped in a makeshift bandage. His usual sarcastic grin was replaced by something quieter, almost reverent. You know, he said looking at the beast, when we first saw that thing I was 90% sure it was going to eat us. Still not completely sure it won't. Rian managed a faint chuckle. It could. But it hasn't. That's enough for now. The apex beast lowered its head, the great muscles in its neck relaxing. It gave a deep, almost sigh-like exhale, and for a moment, it looked almost calm. The tension in the air eased just slightly. They left the docking bay together, Rian walking at the beast's side while Terran followed, glancing over his shoulder every few steps like he was trying to make sure this wasn't some surreal fever dream. Outside, the sky was bruised with the fading light of the alien world sunset. On the far ridge, a group of survivors from the Syndicate's enslaved labor force waited. At first, they froze in place at the sight of the beast, but when they saw Rian's hand brushing lightly against its flank, their fear began to fracture into something else: wonder. A small alien child, no taller than Rian's waist, stepped forward. Her eyes were wide, her thin fingers trembling as she reached toward the beast. It bent low, meeting her gaze, and allowed her hand to rest against the warm, battle-scarred hide. The crowd exhaled as one. Rian felt something shift in that moment. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't even just about defiance. It was proof, living, breathing proof, that the galaxy's so-called deadliest predator could choose peace when given the chance. Terran stood beside him, rubbing the back of his neck. You realize we can't just let it wander off into the wilderness, right? The Syndicate will come back. Others will try to claim it. I know, Rian said. His gaze never left the beast. That's why it's coming with us. Terran blinked. To the ship. Where else? Rian's voice was matter-of-fact, as though bringing an apex predator aboard a human vessel was the most natural decision in the world. The beast gave a low rumble, approval maybe or simply amusement, and followed them up the ramp. In the cockpit, Rian slid into the pilot's seat while Terran took the co-pilot position, muttering under his breath about how insane this was. Behind them, the apex beast settled near the rear bulkhead, its massive form coiled but relaxed, like a predator that had decided, for now, that the den was safe. As the ship's engines roared to life, Rian glanced back once more. The beast's golden eyes caught his, and for just a heartbeat, there was an understanding there that words could never capture. The comms crackled. A syndicate transmission burst through, filled with threats, demands, and the promise of vengeance. Rian didn't respond. He simply cut the channel and eased the ship skyward, leaving the broken battlefield behind. Above the clouds, stars opened like a vast ocean. The apex beast shifted, letting out a deep, almost contented growl. Terran shook his head. You know, Rian, in the stories the humans are never the ones who tame the monsters. They're the ones running from them. Rian's lips curved into a faint smile. Then I guess we're not in one of their stories. The ship vanished into the night, carrying a man, his friend, and the deadliest creature in the galaxy. No longer enemies but something far more dangerous. Allies.